Well, and sticking with that theme, let's do a highlight video here from the NFL. 4-game 175-176, Washington and San Francisco. I'm host Adam Burke, joined by pro bettor and handicapper Brad Powers. And what we were just talking about, and we encourage you to listen to the full shows of ATS Radio, is that when you keep putting it on your defense week after week after week, game after game after game, at some point it becomes a lot. And we're seeing that now with teams like Pittsburgh. We're seeing that, with some of the other teams around the league here. I wonder if that factors into your handicap a little bit with this Washington and San Francisco game, where credit to Washington, they've done what they've had to do to be up tied at the top of the NFC East standings. But you wonder if that defense can have similar success here against a fellow good defense in San Francisco.
Yeah, and it's also not an ideal spot, third straight road game for Washington. And, that sometimes when you're leaning on that defense, if they don't have the legs, it could be, troublesome here. And, a couple of my main handicaps here, San Francisco's kind of been a Jekyll and Hyde team. 1 week they're up. They look like clear playoff contenders. I don't care who's playing at quarterback. I don't care who's in their lineup. They look like a legit playoff team. And then, last week, even though the entire world and the market was on San Francisco, they were obviously outclassed against Buffalo. This to me seems like a play on week. And here's why I think it's a play on week. You're not going to hear this hardly anywhere else. Kyle Shanahan hates Washington. He hates Washington. Why? Washington fired his dad. Washington fired him, Kyle. Last year, if you remember, San Francisco went into Washington and won. He gave the game ball at the end of it to his dad. It would have been worse, but it was played in a torrential downpour. They won 9-0. I think there's some, bad vibes still to this day with, Kyle Shanahan and the Washington organization. So I just think Washington's been a cool story here the last few weeks. I think San Francisco, this is their play on game here. So I like the 49ers quite a bit. Don't mind laying the 120 if you want to play the key number 3 here. They're probably my favorite play of the week, the 49ers.
I like the 49ers too. This is one that's on my short list in a game that you actually brought to my attention. I hadn't really done a ton of legwork on this game, but everything you said makes sense. And something else here for me too is that, as you mentioned, everybody on San Francisco last week. And this line is relatively in the same spot as where that line closed in last week's game.
Something doesn't make sense. And then you compare the Washington, Pittsburgh. Washington was catching 5.5, and now they're catching 3 against San Francisco. I just one of the two doesn't match up if you compare these two teams' lines to last week.
Well, and the thing about it too is, I actually liked Buffalo last week. I was against the money, against the movement in that game. In fact, you owe me dinner for that one. But one of the reasons why is I'm like, okay, you've got Josh Allen in a controlled environment there in Arizona. He's played extremely well when weather hasn't been a factor. So I expected Buffalo to have some offensive success in that game, and they did. The defense was getting healthier. They were able to make some plays on the defensive side, this and that. Washington's offense is not Buffalo's offense. It's really not even close. McLaurin is the big weapon. Outside of that, Washington, kind of hope and pray to a certain degree. Why is it that last week, as San Francisco was getting healthier, everybody loved them? Now this week, nobody wants to touch them. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. If San Francisco wins and covers that game against Buffalo last week, even with Washington beating Pittsburgh, what's this number? 4.5, 5?
Look ahead line was 4.5.
So if San Francisco plays up to last week's expectation put on them by the betting market, this number is quite a bit higher. Because they didn't, we get a discounted San Francisco team, and I'm on the same side as you.
Love it. Glad we don't have a dinner bet on this one.
I know. Right?
I got to tell you, after all that money came in on San Francisco, I was feeling pretty good.
I bet.
I was like, man, I got one here on them. Nope.
No.
Actually, I didn't feel that way. Honestly, it was so one-sided San Francisco money. I ended up on game day betting Buffalo. Are you kidding me? That was almost overwhelming. I couldn't believe it.
Well, and it was the same thing for me with Washington last week. I'm already locked in for the contest for the Circus Sports Million. That's my 5-0 game with Washington, and all this money comes in on Washington, and I'm just shaking my head. I'm texting everybody going, I'm going to lose this game. There's no way Washington covers with everybody on this side. They, of course, wind up winning the game outright, so, that was fortunate, but I think this is a major mispricing here, and it's a very, what have you done for me lately kind of price, and I disagree with it. I think San Francisco definitely the side here. So a consensus opinion from us on ATS Radio with the Washington and San Francisco game. make sure you subscribe to the full editions of ATS Radio and also subscribe to our ATS YouTube channel.